Yes. What was scheduled today, Madam President, board members, was a hearing in the matter of Dr. Walter Ray Wolf, based on 8 counts, violation of the Mississippi Medical Practice Act. During the hearing, Dr. Wolf has agreed to execute a consent order. I believe the board members have that in front of you. Do you not?
Under number 9.
I'll summarize this because this board is familiar generally with the terms and conditions of most consent orders. But in this one it says that whereas the investigative staff of the Mississippi State Board of Medical Licensure has conducted an investigation of licensee and has in its possession evidence which, if established during the course of an evidentiary hearing, would substantiate that licensee is guilty of unprofessional conduct in violation of the Medical Practice Act. In lieu of a hearing, he has agreed to execute a consent order. In fact, it reads, it is the desire of licensee to avoid an evidentiary hearing before the board, and in lieu thereof has agreed to enter into this consent agreement. Now therefore, Mississippi State Board of Medical Licensure, with consent of licensee as signified by his joinder, does hereby take the following disciplinary action. 1, licensee's certificate to practice medicine in the state of Mississippi is hereby suspended for an indefinite period of time from date of execution of this order with no stay of suspension. Now, by statute, whether it's a suspension, an indefinite suspension or revocation, licensees have a right to petition the board for reinstatement after 1 year. Paragraph 2 addresses that. In the event licensee elects to seek reinstatement of his medical license pursuant to section 732532, he is advised and fully understands that there is no guarantee that the board will grant reinstatement. Furthermore, licensee is advised and fully understands and agrees that if the board authorizes reinstatement, the board reserves the right in its sole and absolute discretion to place any and all restrictions on his license deemed necessary to protect the public, and elaborates what those are. He is required to reimburse the board for costs, and the order is subject to approval of this board. In the event you disapprove it, then a full evidentiary hearing will be scheduled. Any questions?
You mentioned suspension or revocation. Is there a difference between suspension and revocation?
Indefinite suspension and revocation are all very similar. In fact, the statute says suspension or revocation, that right to petition for reinstatement after 1 year applies. Very little difference.
Do we have the option of having a revocation instead of a suspension, or does it matter?
Procedurally, it does not matter.
A revocation has a somewhat stronger connotation than suspension.
It does. It has a little more of a stigma.
But they can both reapply to be heard in a year.
That's correct. I emphasize, this is an indefinite suspension. This is not a suspension for 1 year. It is indefinite. This board reserves the right. If Dr. Wolf decides to petition for reinstatement, it's his option. He's not obligated. Then this board would have the authority to say yes or no, and the conditions if it does grant.
There are no court dates or anything like that scheduled because he's under this order or whatever. So we have no upcoming court dates.
No, that's correct. And once accepted by this board, it becomes a public record. Now, I will say this, the summons and affidavit will also become a public record, but it will be redacted to respect the anonymity of the 3 patients, victims as I call them. It's important that men or women who may have been abused by professional sexual misconduct are encouraged to come to this board and complain. And so it's my recommendation that we redact and redact the pleadings to avoid identification of any of these victims, to encourage others to come forward when they feel like they've been a victim professional sexual misconduct.
Stan, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I feel like when these circumstances arise, that it is very important that this board and our relationship with the public, that is very clear, that our goal is to protect the public first and foremost. That is our responsibility and our duty. And anything that we can do that will foster the positive interaction with this board to let them know that even if they don't feel safe in their physician's office, that this is a place amongst physicians where they can feel safe is something that we must do. And that's not even something I feel like is an option. And protecting those individuals who have been brave enough to come forward is imperative. I don't even know that there's any other way.
Do we need a motion from this board to redact those documents?
That would be appropriate.
Stan, why are y'all recommending indefinite suspension versus revocation?
Because of very little difference, and it was a negotiation.
It was or was not?
It was part of the negotiation. I will accept a motion to redact the documentation regarding this case to blot out the names of the victims involved in this case.
So moved.
I think the appropriate motion would be to redact any identifying information, not just the names.
So,
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
so this is the most expedient, cleanest way to get to the end point. We're all that we all desire.
Yes.
Right. Well, I will accept a motion at this time. Somebody want to make a motion to accept this consent order?
I'll make a motion, we accept the consent order as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And it passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Already on page 2. Request approval of proposed consent order for Harold Todd Coulter, MD of Biloxi,